where Mr. Furman surprised you with that language to any period of the year that would help us determine which of her vacations it might have been?
I tried to by the weather, but the weather is all the same in California, and I really think it's more toward the summertime, or maybe Easter vacation and then summer vacation, because I seem to have been speaking to Andrea quite a bit throughout this period of time, and she really wasn't home for any long period of time except for the summer.
How long had you known Andrea Terry?
I've known her for many years. She went to my high school, and we weren't close friends until a couple of years after high school.
In Brigham Young University, where she was there attending, where's that located?
In Utah.
Is she a resident or a native of Utah or of California, if you know?
I believe she was born in California.
And as I understand it, you had talked to her several times in this general time frame?
Yes.
And would you talk to her when she was at college on a regular basis, or only when she was home?
Not very often at college, only when she was home.
Can you tell us how much time transpired between the moment that you first noticed Mark Furman talking to the Marines but did not intervene until you introduced yourself to him?
At least a week, probably. No more than 3 weeks.
Okay. Did you see Mark Furman again?
After the second
first encounter?
After the first encounter, yes.
I'm trying to distinguish seeing him from encountering him where you interact or have a conversation.
Right.
Okay. Now, time number 3
Yes.
is the second encounter, is that correct?
Yes.
Will you have some talk together?
I didn't really speak to him.
Okay.
We kind of exchanged glances.
Where did you see him on this third occasion?
At Hennessy's Tavern on Catalina Avenue in Redondo Beach.
Was this an establishment with which you were familiar?
Somewhat, yes.
Had you been there before?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Had you any prearrangement, to your knowledge, either you or Andrea Terry, to meet Mark Furman at Hennessy's that day?
Oh, no. No prior arrangement.
Are you able to differentiate these meetings as between 85 and 86? You have said that it occurred in one year or the other. What would be your best recollection?
Probably 86.
In either the spring or summer?
Probably the summer.
Okay. But in any event, you saw him in the Marine Corps recruiting station on more than one occasion during this period?
Yes.
All right. Now, tell me the circumstances of your meeting in Hennessy's Tavern. Who were you with?
I was with Andrea.
And what was the purpose or occasion for you being with her? Anything special?
No, we just stopped.
Okay.
No
And why did
special
you go to
thing.
Hennessy's that day?
Just to, it's kind of like a local pub and almost like a Cheers or something like that. And we just wanted to visit with people.
Can you tell us the time of day?
I cannot.
When you arrived at Hennessy's, what did you do?
We just sat down and we just started talking. And usually there are a lot of people that we grew up with that visit there. And so we say hello to those people. And that's it. I remember where we were sitting and all of that.
Are you familiar with the floor layout at Hennessy's Tavern?
Mm-hmm, yes.
And can you give the court and jury some brief description of what it looks like as you walk in the door?
You walk in Hennessy's and there are there's some tables on the left-hand side and the bar is on the left, and then on the right there are tables as well, and then kind of just one bar going through the middle. And Andrea and I were sitting facing the door.
Were you in a booth or at a table?
It's considered a booth. Yeah.
How many booths are in the bar?
Oh, I don't know. Probably a good guess would be about 10.
Okay. And what did you do after you sat down? Did you order something?
Just were talking, yes. I probably ordered cranberry juice with lime, and Andrea probably, I don't even know. We're not real drinkers, but
did either of you have any alcoholic beverages that day?
Pardon me?
Did either of you order or consume any alcohol when you were in the bar?
I did not. I don't think Andrea did either.
Okay. And after you had been there for some period of time, did you notice someone you had seen before?
Yes.
Who was that?
Mark Furman.
Was he with anyone?
Yes, he was.
Can you describe the person that he was with?
Slightly. It was a woman, and with sandy blonde hair.
And can you give any further description as to her height and weight and so forth?
No, I really can't. Probably about 5'7".
How was Mark Furman dressed on that occasion?
I don't remember.
How had he been dressed when you talked to him in the Marine recruiting station, if you recall?
I think at one time he was wearing sweats, and that's all I can remember.
Did you ever see him wearing a police uniform?
No.
Okay. How long had you been in Hennessy's when he sat down?
I don't recall.
And when he sat down, what, if anything, did you do or say?
He and this woman sat down facing us, and so I saw him immediately, and it was very uncomfortable. So I told Andrea that that is that man that I told her about, that I at first wanted to set her up with, and then I found out what he believed, and then I asked her if we could leave.
Did he show any signs of recognition while looking in your direction?
I don't know if he did at first, but as I left, he did.
Okay. And in what way did he indicate that he might have seen you before?
He just gave me kind of a nasty look.
Okay. Now, what happened after you said to Andrea that you felt uncomfortable and would like to leave the establishment?
She said, okay, and I thought that she was going with me, and we started walking toward the door. Mark Furman and this woman were sitting, as you walk into Hennessy's and you take your first right, he was sitting at a table to the right, and he was sitting facing us. So Andrea and I started walking toward the door, and when we were walking toward the door, we were walking toward Mark Furman and this woman, and she started kind of veering off toward his table, and I was kind of trying to catch her and telling her, you know, don't, what are you doing, you know, and she kind of had a grin on her face like she was going to go get his goat or something like that.
Uh-huh. And did you stay within earshot of the two?
No, I did not.
What did you do?
I went to the door. I'm not sure if I waited in my car or waited outside, but I know I left.
Can you recall hearing any conversation from either Andrea Terry, Mark Furman, or the lady that was with him that day?
I did not hear anything.
Can you tell us whether or not you saw her sit down as you walked out the door?
I thought she was standing facing them, but I think she was just standing facing them.
Okay. And how long was it before she rejoined you, wherever you were?
I don't think it was any more than 10 minutes, probably 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay. And you stood either outside the bar or went and got in your automobile?
Right.
Is that correct? What kind of automobile were you driving at that time? Okay. Did you at any time have conversation with Mark Furman concerning astrology?
As embarrassing as it is, yes. When I met him,
Did you have a conversation with him?
briefly, yes.
When was this?
The second time I met him, I found out he was Aquarius.
All right. When astrology is relevant, what is important to know about a person before looking at their astrological signs?
I don't know. There is this book that I was given by someone to read, and it was talking about how people relate to each other, so I briefly read it, and I asked when his birthday was, and I remember thinking in my head that he was Aquarius.
What was his sign?
Aquarius?
Aquarius? What birth dates does that cover? What range?
Oh boy, let's see. I've got to think about this.
Let me put it a different
January.
way. Is February 5th within the range of Aquarius?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you have any talk with Mr. Furman about the significance of his astrological sign that you can remember?
Very briefly. I just,
Did that occur before the remarks were made in the Marine recruiting station?
about the black man with the white
About
woman.
his birth date?
I'm sorry, I
I'm
didn't
trying to
understand the
place the
question.
time that you learned
Right.
his birth date.
Okay.
When did that happen?
It happened when I started talking about my girlfriend Andrea.
Okay.
This was for the purpose to see if they were compatible.
Yes.
Next question.
After Andrea came out, without telling us what she said, did you have any conversation with her about what had transpired while you stepped out of Hennessy's and she was still inside at Furman's table.
Yes. I just asked actually, I didn't really even ask what was said. She just said, "Oh, God." Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't tell us what
All
she
right.
said. My only question is, did she tell you something
Yes,
about
she
the
did.
conversation? And what did you two do after that?
I don't recall. We probably just went home.
Did you ever see Mark Furman again?
I saw him driving in his car once, and I saw him on television.
Now, apart from the television, when you saw him driving in his car, do you have any recollection of what kind of vehicle he was driving?
I believe it was an International Scout, like a utility vehicle, and it was kind of a pea green and white.
All right. Do you have any personal knowledge as to whether he owned that vehicle or was simply driving it?
I don't know, but I saw it in front of the Marine Recruiting Center, and I saw him driving it later, and I saw it parked in front of Hennessy's, and that prevented Andrew and I from going in. Andrew and me.
Did you ever personally see Mark Furman again?
No, I did not.
All right. Now, you have told us that your second seeing of Mark Furman and your first encounter was probably within 3 weeks of your first noticing him in the station, and you didn't stop.
Probably.
Can you relate the Hennessy's bar encounter to the one in the Marine Corps recruiting station in terms of time?
Probably, again, about 3 weeks or a month.
All right. And the occasion in which you simply saw him drive by and had no conversation with him, how much after Hennessy's bar might that have occurred?
I don't know, but again, Andrea was still in town.
What is the longest you would expect Andrea to be in town if she were on other than a summer vacation from Brigham Young?
She may have skipped a quarter, and I'm not even sure if they're on the quarter system there, but she may have skipped a quarter, and I'm not sure when that was, when that fell.
How did you learn Mark Furman's name? Did someone tell you the name, or did he tell you?
When I was introduced to him at the Marine Recruiting Center, I was introduced to him as Mark.
And who did the introduction?
I believe it was Ron Rohr.
As a result of the remarks that Mark Furman said to you on your first encounter, where he talked to you, did you do anything with respect to the LAPD that you can recall?
Yes,
What did you
I did. What did I do? I called the LAPD. I tried anyway, and it wasn't 911, but it was, I seem to recall Culver or Olympic, and I don't know if that means a street that, or a district, or I don't.
Do you remember how you got the number that you called to place this complaint?
I called, I think the operator, or 411.
And asked for whom, if you can remember?
I asked for the Los Angeles Police Department in Westwood because that's where he said that he worked at that time, and I don't think there was such a thing. And she was saying, well, I can give you Olympic or Culver or something like that.
Did you get a number and eventually call it?
I did.
Do you have any recollection of whom you may have spoken with?
I believe it was a woman, and I hate to be so vague, but I really don't recall. But I truly believe it was a woman.
And can you recall whether or not Mark Furman's name was used during your conversation with whatever woman you spoke to?
Well, I said that there's a police officer.
Oh, well,
I said that they have a police officer named Mark, and I told her that he had a racial problem and that I thought they should know. But I didn't have any other information about him, and I was afraid to ask the Marines his last name.
Why didn't you want to ask the Marines?
I didn't want to seem like I was trying to get information about him to get him into trouble because I was afraid of him.
Did you ever follow up on that call or go see anyone?
No, I did not.
Were you asked to do anything further by the woman at the other end of the police line?
No, not at all.
When was the next time you saw, either personally or on television, Mark Furman?
I did see him on television last year.
All right. Was that perhaps during the preliminary hearing?
Yes, it was.
Might it have been in July of '94?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And where were you when you noticed Mark Furman on the screen?
I was at home.
And what was he doing when you first noticed him?
He was sitting as a witness.
And was he testifying?
Yes, he was testifying.
Now, my understanding is that from the time you last saw him driving the Pea Green International Scout until you saw him on television, you had no direct encounters or indirect encounters with Mark Furman.
No.
Overruled.
You've indicated that you were afraid of him in a way. Can you explain why that is so?
I think that what he said was,
Sustained.
Can you describe his demeanor when he spoke the words using the N-word about the black race? How did his face appear?
Overruled.
he seemed disgusted.
Did you see any signs whatsoever of jocularity in his face, as if he were pulling your leg with these outrageous remarks?
No.
Overruled.
All right. When you saw Mark Furman on television, did you recognize him immediately?
Immediately.
And how did you recognize?
I saw him, and it all came back, every bit of it.
All right. Well, you were remembering now what about the Mark Furman you had encountered back in '85 or '86?
I remember what he said.
All right. But you remember his facial appearance?
Oh, yes.
He was a handsome man, you said?
Yes.
And his height?
He was sitting again when I saw him, but I remember his face.
All right, excuse me, counsel and Ms. Bell. If you would you allow Mr. Bailey to complete asking you the question before you start to answer? Mr. Bailey, would you allow her to finish answering before
Yes,
you
sure.
start the next question?
Sorry.
Thank you.
What, if anything, did you do after seeing Mr. Furman testifying in the preliminary hearing in the Simpson case?
I called the news show that I first saw him on. That was the first thing that I did. I wasn't sure what to do, and I just know that I felt afraid again. I felt that same feeling that I felt in that Marine Recruiting Center when I saw him on television, and I thought that someone should know, and I didn't know what to do, so I called the news company, and I told some young person on the phone that what they just showed was true. There's something about this man that is
Sustained.
Don't tell us what you said, but can you
Okay.
identify the news program and why you called that program?
It was Channel 9, and I called because I saw him.
Now, Ms. Bell, when you say you saw him on the channel, do you mean on the witness stand in court or being interviewed outside of court?
On the witness stand, but I'm not certain if he was saying anything. I think that the news broadcaster was speaking over the film of him.
And what did you understand his role was, if any, in the case at that point?
Sustained.
What caused you to call the news media? Why did you think that was important? Channel 9.
Overruled.
I
Overruled.
I really didn't know what to do, and I thought that someone should know that something is wrong with this person, and something was said, and I was vacuuming kind of and cleaning at the time, and I didn't hear exactly what was said, but something about a racial issue, and so I thought that people should know that this person has a problem.
Without going into what was said, did you contact anyone at Channel 9?
Only this young man who answered the phone.
Did you have a conversation with him?
Yes.
Did you ever have any further contact with anyone at Channel 9?
A reporter later on,
And
But-
where did that occur?
much later on. I was walking out from my office where I work, and he kind of tracked me down in his news van.
Okay. Now, at some point, did you write a letter to Mr. Cochran?
Yes, I did.
And do you know whether or not that letter has been displayed for this jury earlier in the case?
It has been displayed.
No, I'm simply asking if you know that's true or don't.
I'm not really sure. I don't think so.
Have you seen the letter recently?
I just saw it this morning.
Okay. And why did you write Mr. Cochran a letter?
Well,
Overruled.
I thought that I didn't want someone to be tried without all the information, and I thought that there might be some reason that they need to know that Mark Furman said these things to me.
Were you, without saying what was said, were you acting on the advice of anyone or on your own initiative
No.
when you wrote the letter?
On my own initiative.
Now, this letter was written at about what date, as you can best recall?
July 18th, I believe, or July 19th.
All right. Was this after the preliminary hearing was over, to your knowledge?
I don't know. I hadn't been watching the case. I'd listened to it on the radio on my way home, but I really wasn't watching it very much.
As a result of that letter, did somebody contact you?
Yes.
Can you give us the name of the person that contacted you?
Mr. Douglas?
Carl Douglas?
Yes.
All right. And without going into what was said, did you have some conversation with him?
Yes, I did.
Did you thereafter talk with anyone else affiliated with the defense of this case?
Yes.
Okay. And can you name that person?
Okay, I spoke with a Pat McKenna, but before that I spoke with a man, excuse me, I don't remember his name.
Should it have been Pavlik?
Yes, Mr.
William
Pavlik.
Pavlik?
Yes.
Okay. Did you speak at length with either of these two defense investigators?
Not, Mr. Pavlik I spoke to quite a bit.
Okay. And did you tell him essentially what was in the contents of your letter?
Yes, I did.
All right. Now, can you tell us who this gentleman is right here?
That is my family's attorney and my attorney,
He's
Mr.
represented your
Daigneault.
family for some years now?
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
And just for the record, counsel, do you want to identify him? Counsel?
I'm sorry. He's identified out of the presence of the jury, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Taylor Daigneault, who practices in Redondo Beach.
Thank you, counsel.
At some point, did you contact Mr. Daigneault without going into anything that was said?
Yes.
Can you relate us in time to when that first occurred with respect to Mark Furman?
Oh, well,
With respect to seeing him on television.
With respect to your whole involvement in letting the defense know what he had done years before, when did you seek the advice of Mr. Daigneault on this point?
Yes.
Sorry.
Probably, gosh, let's see, I don't know when the reporters started finding me, but there is, after the Channel 9 reporter found me, that's when I contacted him, and I don't know what that time frame was. Probably a month later or 3 weeks later.
All right. Now, at any time, did you contact anyone affiliated with law enforcement with this information? Or attempt to contact?
After the, you mean since I saw him?
Yes.
I sent my same letter, I faxed my same letter to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office.
Did you get a response for anyone in the L.A. District Attorney's Office after you faxed a copy of the letter to Mr. Cochran?
No, I did not.
Have you ever talked to anyone from that office?
No, I haven't.
Have you ever talked to myself prior to this morning?
No, I have not.
Or any other lawyer at the defense table or affiliated with the defense, to your knowledge, other than the one call from Mr. Douglas?
No,
Okay. Have you been interviewed by either side? That is to say, lawyers for either side.
no,
Have you ever heard from anyone connected with law enforcement since you sent that letter out?
no.
Now, did you follow the proceedings in this case at all, this trial?
Since I saw Mark Furman, I did. I was a little bit more interested, so I started following it.
And do you recall a time when he testified when your name was brought into the trial?
Yes,
Do you recall things that were said about you by the prosecution at that time?
Sustained.
Okay. Exhibit 102 has been previously shown to the jury in enlarged form during Mr. Furman's testimony, and I would like to bring it up again now. And Ms. Bell, it will appear on a little television set down to your right and also up on that big screen, but I think you'll be able to read it better.
Okay.
Now, I'd like to go through it with you and ask you whether or not you recollect this as being a letter that you originated. First, did you have any help in drafting this letter?
No, I did not.
Second. All right. Now, and how did you know that Mr. Cochran would be a good person to write to in connection with the information that you had?
I called the information operator and I tried to get Mr. Shapiro's phone number, and he just kind of laughed and said, well, you can't get that phone number.
The operator said, you can't get Shapiro's phone number?
Right.
I see. Okay. So what did you do next?
On that same news broadcast, they had mentioned an attorney named Johnny Cochran, and I didn't know even if he was in California or not. So I just thought I'd try. And I did get that phone number, and he had an answering service, and I asked for the fax number.
Okay. And did you get it?
Yes, I did.
And when you composed this letter, can you tell us mechanically how you did it? Was it handwritten, typed, or computer, or what?
No, I just went on a computer.
And did you type it yourself
Yes,
and print it out?
yes.
All right. Now, would you look at the first paragraph down to your right? You mentioned that you were writing in regards to a story you saw on the news last night, and you previously told us that you think this letter was sent out on July 18th when you got Mr. Cochran's fax number. Is that right?
I think I actually wrote the letter on July 18th or 19th, and then I ended up staying up so late that it ended up being the 20th that I actually faxed it.
Okay. Well, can you help us with what date is meant by last night in the first paragraph, first sentence of that letter?
I have this at home. I'm sorry. I believe it was the 19th that I started writing it, and that I saw the news broadcast the 19th, and the 20th is when I actually sent it.
Do you have any recollection, Ms. Bell, as to what news program you were watching that you're referring to in that first sentence?
Channel 9 News.
Is that a station that you generally watch?
Yes, I guess. Sure.
Next sentence says, I thought it ridiculous that the Simpson defense team would even suggest that there might be racial motivation involved in the trial against Mr. Simpson. Now, without going into the text of what you had heard before, had you heard such a claim advanced by somebody?
Yes.
In the next sentence, you say, I then glanced up at the television and was quite shocked to see that Officer Furman was a man that I had the misfortune of meeting. When you glanced up at the television, as you describe in that sentence, did you recognize Mr. Furman immediately?
Immediately.
Had anyone in your entire life, on a first greeting, ever treated you the way that you were treated by him in that Marine recruiting station?
Never.
All right. You say you may have received a message from your answering service last night that I called to say that Mr. Furman may be more of a racist than you can even imagine. Had you left a message on an answering service the night before that you believed to be that of Mr. Cochran?
Yes.
And did the answering message contain generally the information that's in that sentence? Did it use the word racist?
I don't know if I said anything. Actually, I do know that I said something. I don't know exactly what it was.
Okay. In other words, you're not sure that you told the answering machine what's in that letter about Mr. Furman, simply that you called to make contact. Is that right?
It was an answering service.
Service.
Right. And
And the
I
one that gave you
spoke
the
to the
fax.
woman. Right. I spoke
But
to the woman, and I.
You don't recall if you told the woman the text of your complaint?
Right.
Okay. Now, you said between 1985 and 1986, I worked as a real estate agent. Do you mean by that during 85 and 86?
Yes.
And was the company out of business at the time you wrote this letter, as you have said?
Yes.
Okay. And you have told us, I believe, that your office, Century 21, was in fact located above the Marine Recruiting Center off of the Pacific Coast Highway. That's correct?
Yes.
And you would stop on occasion to say hello to the two Marines working there you've identified as Mr. Foss and Mr. Rohrer, right?
Yes.
By the way, were they generally in uniform when you saw them?
They were always in uniform.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me, except for once or twice. I saw Joe Foss. We went jogging.
I saw Mr. Furman there a couple of times because I remember him distinctly because of his height and build. Now, is that the height and build you told us you noted because you were concerned with fixing up your friend Andrea Terry with someone of equal or greater stature?
Yes.
Okay. Next page, please. When you saw Mr. Furman at the recruiting station on the first two occasions, was he wearing any of the accoutrements of a policeman, like a weapon or that sort of thing that you saw?
I didn't notice anything.
Okay. You say that while speaking to the men, I learned that Mr. Furman was a police officer in Westwood, and I don't know if he was telling the truth, but he said that he had been in a special division of Marines. Now, I'd like to stop there for a moment and see if we can sort this out. You saw Mr. Furman through the window, tapped on the window, and walked on the first occasion. You noted that he was tall and a good-looking man. You then spoke with the Marines when Mr. Furman was not present about the propriety of introducing yourself,
Yes.
and subsequently you did introduce yourself to be greeted by his views that you've described. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. What I want to know is whether or not the information about his having been in a special division of the Marines came from the two Marines or one of them, or came from Furman himself.
I believe it came from one of the Marines.
All right. In other words, they related this to you before you ever talked to him.
I
Your best
believe so.
recollection.
Right. After the first time that I met him, that I saw him, I spoke to them, and at that time we talked about it a little bit.
Okay. Did you inquire of them as to any other information relating to Mr. Furman, his marital status, what he did, et cetera?
Not his marital status. I just said that I was uncomfortable walking in while he was there, and they said that he was a former Marine. That he was a former Marine that just liked to come and shoot the breeze, so it was fine that I could walk in.
Okay. All right, at that point, you say, I don't know how the subject was raised, but Officer Furman said that when he sees an N, as he called it, driving with a white woman, he would pull them over. Now, there's no mention of Marcus Allen there. Do you now remember that his name was mentioned before this
Yes, I
response?
do.
Okay.
And I also, excuse me, remember that he didn't say the N-word
Okay.
at first.
Hold on. Next question.
You say, I asked if he didn't have a reason, and he said that he would find one.
Yes.
Did you mean by that a reason to pull them over?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. A moment ago, you wanted to explain something to us that you had just recalled. Would you tell us what that was?
When in this letter, I wrote this in a very big hurry, and I didn't think that there would be such a need to recall exactly what had happened in detail. So there was a mistake there, and he did not say the N-word when he said, if I saw a black man with a white woman driving in a car, I would pull them over. He definitely said a black man.
Okay. And did he use that word later when he talked about burning everybody?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Did he use black or a word beginning with N?
The N-word.
Okay. Now, there is no mention in this paragraph about the query supposing they were in love.
Right.
You left that out of your letter.
Right.
All right. Have you gone over this encounter in your mind since the time you wrote this letter?
Many, many
Have
times.
you discussed it without saying what was said with a number of people?
Yes.
Do you have, as you sit there today, a clear recollection of the words uttered by Mark Furman as you have described them in your testimony?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. If we can pull up the next paragraph, Mr. Douglas. If you would just read that first sentence and ask you whether or not you distinctly recall him using those words.
Officer Furman went on to say that he would like nothing more than to see all niggers gathered together and killed. He said something about about burning them or bombing them. I was too shaken to remember the exact words he used. However, I do not remember that what he... Wait, I'm sorry. I do remember that what he said was probably the most horrible thing I had ever heard someone say. What frightened me even more was that he was a police officer.
Now, Ms. Bell, is all of that true? Everything that you wrote there?
I know now that he said gathered together and burned.
Okay. Next paragraph, please, Mr. Levin. All right, you have said in your letter that you're almost sure you called the LAPD. What is your present recollection as to whether you did?
I am positive I did.
Okay. And in the last full paragraph of information, you say that now that you know that Mr. Furman was the investigating officer, are you relating that to the Simpson investigation?
Yes, I am.
And that information came to you because you saw him on television?
Right.
You said, I'm certainly not a fan of Mr. Simpson, but I would hate to see anyone harmed by Officer Furman's extreme hatred. Now, were you writing this letter or bringing this information forward in an effort to help O.J. Simpson in any way?
No, I was not.
All right. And did you invite the recipient, Mr. Cochran, to contact you for further information, as it says there?
Yes.
Okay. In one more effort to try and pin down the time frame, is it true that you began to work for Mr. Marr in the fall of '85, early fall, September-ish?
Yes.
Okay. And how long did this job last?
I think it was October. I'm sorry. I think it was October.
October of
but-
'85?
Right.
And when did you last work for him?
Probably October of '86.
All right. So that if there were a spring or summer series of encounters, it would have to be in 1986? Is that correct?
I think it would be '86. Yes.
Didn't work there in the spring or summer of
Right.
'85 or '87,
Right.
did you?
Right.
Okay, now, with respect to time, when you faxed the letter we have just reviewed to Mr. Cochran's office, how soon thereafter did you fax that same letter to the district attorney?
The next day.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Darden?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Bell, did you fax the same letter to Chief Willie Williams?
No, I did not.
Do you fax the letter to Chief Willie Williams?
I take it that you understand that this word, this epithet, is the most vile word in the English language.
Yes.
You'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And when you heard Detective Furman use this word, you were offended.
Yes.
You were hurt by it,
Yes.
and you were frightened of him because of his use of this word.
Yes.
You were horrified, I think you testified earlier.
Excuse me, not just because of the use of the word, but because what he said.
And you
along
felt...
with it.
I'm sorry, did you finish?
Sorry. Along with it.
Okay. And you felt that the fact of this encounter ought to be made known to the defense attorneys and also to the DA's office, is that right?
Yes.
When you heard Detective Furman use these words, you cried. Or did you cry?
Somewhat.
Somewhat?
Yes, I was teary-eyed. He could see that I was upset.
And you immediately left the recruiting office.
Yes.
Despite the horror and the trauma Detective Furman's use of this word caused, isn't it true that you still introduced Andrea Terry to Mark Furman?
I did not.
Is she in the building today?
I heard that she was.
You expect that she's going to be testifying later?
Sustained.
Detective Furman did use this word, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Now, when you and Andrea Terry saw Detective Furman in Hennessy's bar, did you say to Andrea Terry that Detective Furman would be a good person for her to date?
No. I believe I spoke with Andrea about that after the first time I saw him at the Marine Recruiting Center. Before Hennessy's, and before the second time I saw him at the Marine Recruiting Center.
And did you introduce Andrea Terry to Detective Furman?
No, I did not.
And did you sit at a table with Andrea Terry and Detective Furman and the other woman you described?
I would never do that.
I'm sorry?
No, I did not.
Okay. Now, you didn't want to come here and testify. Is that right?
No,
Okay. You did want to testify?
I did not want to testify.
You didn't want to help the defendant in this case?
No, I did not.
Okay. And that's because you think he...
Sustained? No. Counsel, I understand Mr. Bailey's handling this witness?
Yes, he is.
And he's able to do that admirably. Sustained. Move on.
I want to make certain that you have given us a full account, as best you can, as to what happened between you and Detective Furman. Have you?
Yes,
Okay. And everything you've said this morning before this jury is true?
yes, it is.
Okay. Now, I believe you told Mr. Bailey that you haven't, let's strike that. Did you tell Mr. Bailey that you haven't used the N-word yourself before?
I've never used that to describe another person. I've used it several times, many times lately, in referring to Mark Furman's conversation.
Okay. Well, other than your references to Mark Furman's conversations, have you ever used that word yourself?
I've never used that word to describe someone, no.
Not once in your whole life?
Not once in my whole life.
Not one time in the last 10 years, that is, other than in reference to Detective Furman's conversations.
Object, and that's for an offer of proof.
Sustained. It's irrelevant. It's a collateral issue.
You testified also that no one from the DA's office interviewed you. Is that right?
This is true.
But there were attempts by members of the DA's office to interview you. Is that right?
My attorney was arranging something, but he wanted a court reporter to be there.
Okay. At any
That's all I
event,
remember.
okay. In any event, the DA's office did attempt to interview you. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bailey?
Ms. Bell, what was the information you were trying to give us about the condition that your attorney imposed on an interview relating to a court reporter? What did he ask, if you know?
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Was there a request that a court reporter be present if you were interviewed by the prosecution?
Yes.
Overruled. Answer will stand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The answer is yes, there was?
Yes, sir.
And you learned of that through Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
All right. And what was the response, as you understand it, from the district attorney's office that a court reporter be present to take down what was said?
Sustained.
Okay. Did the interview ever take place?
No, it did not.
Have you always been willing to submit to an interview provided a court reporter could be present to take down what was said?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Darden?
You did give interviews to Larry King and Dateline NBC. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
There was no court reporter there, right?
But the proof was there.
Are you aware that we in the DA's office tape record almost every interview we do?
Objection, irrelevant.
Or
I wasn't aware of that, no.
Are you aware that the DA's office offered to provide a stenographer during any interview that you might have had with us?
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I can't get a question.
would you keep your voice up, Mr. Judge?
Are you aware?
Or rule.
Are you aware that the DA's office offered to provide a stenographer to be present during any conversation that you might have had with us?
I am not aware of that, no.
Okay. You never had a conversation with Ms. Lewis?
No, I did not.
Okay, but your lawyer did.
Oh, yes, he did.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, Ms. Bell, thank you very much.
All
You're
right,
excused.
thank you.
All right, next witness.
They've asked for a 402.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as far as the jury is concerned, we're going to take our recess just a little bit early. Please remember all my admonitions to you, and we'll probably call you back in about 20 minutes. All right?